I don't know what's appropriate for this morning. Is it cocoa or cocoa? It's good. It's Holy Saturday. What do you take on Holy Saturday?
Cocoa. We're still fasting.
Oh, yeah.
So cocoa would be in order.
Cocoa. Go and get your cocoa this morning. And you know it's differently prepared from ugi. So just so you know.
Is it?
Oh, yes, it is.
Anyway, thank you for staying with us. We're talking support for spousal abuse survivors this morning. And you would wonder why we're talking about this at this particular time. If you recall, during COVID, we discussed something to do with this, and it came out that because people were forced to stay at home more, there was more abuse going on because spouses were not used to staying together, and because of COVID, they were now forced to stay together. Many of them didn't even know each other. Well, they didn't realize that they didn't know each other until COVID came along.
Or that they had evolved as much as they have. In fact, I think the police also mentioned it. I think it was in March of 2020. The police, Frank Kumba, mentioned it. Look, when we told him that, we were hearing these cases of, domestic abuse, he said, we are just starting. I was shocked. I said, we're just starting. Because, people who were not staying together before will now be compelled to stay together. And it was a global phenomenon. A lot of divorce cases came, a lot of separation cases came because...
And a lot of babies came along.
Well, we're talking about domestic violence now, not domestic expansion. So that happened a lot. So it was because people were compelled to face the issues they'd been trying to avoid over time.
Yeah. And domestic violence is also called dating violence, intimate partner abuse, spousal abuse, intimate partner violence, and domestic abuse. And it takes place in many forms. It strikes couples of all races, religion, socio-economic status, and sexual orientations. Now we have a panel this morning to help us look at this, and it's my pleasure to welcome Mrs. Atinuke Odukoya, who is the Director, Center for Women's Health and Information.
Good morning.
Good morning. Sitting right next to her is Dr. Jibril Abdul Malik, consultant psychiatrist and founder and CEO, Asido Foundation.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
And on this side of the divide, we have Antonia Ojenagmo, Sexual and Gender-Based Violence, SGBV advocate. Thank you very much for coming this morning.
You're welcome.
Let me start with you, madam. Why is it that this particular problem is now coming into focus? Is it that it is new in our society? Why the spotlight on it?
Okay, so the spotlight on it is because a lot of awareness and sensitization is going on, and also because people are getting a bit bolder and able to come out of their domestic private spaces to speak out about the things that are going on. It's also saddening that a lot more harm is being done at this time. So more people are dropping dead, more people are getting hospitalized, and then there's this media spotlight to it. There's several activities that are going on within the communities among CSOs and other groups that is also putting a spotlight on issues of gender-based violence in general, and then domestic violence or intimate partner violence as one of the forms of gender-based violence within our communities. So that is making people speak more, come out more, and a lot more people are now able to talk about these things. It's something that we used to be ashamed of. People will cower behind their doors and their windows to protect and keep what's going on. And then we can't take away the Sorosoke generation. This group of young people that will speak out no matter what. They're tired of hiding, they're tired of pretense, they're tired of the hypocrisy, and they're just out there Mommy, if you won't talk, I'm going to tell somebody. Mommy, if you will not do something about this, I will do something. So they are speaking. And, you know, the society is just seeing something that we've tried to hide for so long. Like I say to myself, we've played the ostrich for too long. And now the chicken has come to roost. So that's where we are at this time.
Dr. Abdul Malik, when we think about this kind of violence, most of the time we think about the men beating the women. But the women have their own whip with which they beat the men as well, which is their mouths.
Absolutely.
But somehow, no one talks about that. How much do you see in your practice of men who have been abused, as in not physically, but with words, you know, verbal abuse from women?
Right. Thank you very much. This is also very common. You know, in terms of gender, we have differences by gender. And as a rule of the thumb, of course, not a general, it doesn't apply to everybody, but as a rule of the thumb, generally, women are better communicators in terms of verbal communication, generally, than men. And so if you then have a situation where you have a relationship with someone who gets very easily frustrated and who has a low frustration threshold, has anger management issues, and is not able to communicate as clearly as the other individual, that is a recipe for lashing out, and violence ensues. So when we talk about abuse generally, there is emotional abuse, and emotional abuse can include verbally insulting, denigrating remarks. It's all forms of abuse. So abuse is not just physical or sexual. There is also emotional or verbal abuse, which can also be equally damaging, even though it doesn't leave physical scars. So all forms of abuse are condemned, right? But the reason why, what we know, the facts show that the majority of abuses that go on, the perpetrators are male. And the ones that have lethal consequences, most of the time, will be physical or sexual assault. And the major gender on the receiving end of that are commonly females. In fact, we do not have reliable statistics for Nigeria, but in the UK, there's a femicide census, which is a census of number of women being killed. And they published a 10-year report in 2020 and showed that every 3 days, a female in the UK, a female dies from assault. Usually
3 days.
Every 3 days. And the WHO also reports very worrying figures that if you look at the lifetime from the time we are born to the time we die, for females, 1 in 3 females, so there are 3 females on this panel now, according to WHO statistics, 1 out of every 3 would have suffered assault at some point in time during their lifetime. So these statistics, figures don't lie. Well, you can play with statistics, but generally speaking, the figures globally reveal that there is a lot of assaults and that females are generally at the receiving end. That's not to exclude the fact that in some instances, in some relations, males are at the receiving end of abuse. It may commonly be verbal abuse, as you rightly said, but sometimes even physical abuse also. Just that, you know, but that will even be...
But that's rare.
But it occurs.
But it's rare.
But even when it occurs,
the numbers will be a lot smaller.
True,
maybe like 1 out of 10. I'm just saying.
Yes, the numbers are small actually. So the numbers are really small. But even when it occurs, you know, no man will be confident enough to come and say.
Hence the reason the data is
on
not
that
available.
On that reporting, yes. So that's the situation.
Is this peculiar? Sorry, just a quick follow. Is it peculiar? Has any research been able to say why?
Oh yes. Why the gender difference, or why this occurs?
Why this occurs?
Right. Oh, there are some reasons. It's a multifaceted problem. It's not a one factor, one causative factor. And it starts from the family, upbringing, the grooming of the child. We know in our society here in Nigeria, for instance, that males are allowed to play football, boys will be boys, but the female children say, come and assist in the kitchen, so that when you go to your husband's house, you must know how to do this. And so there's a lot of emphasis on grooming the female child.
Does that still happen?
Of course. There is more indulgence of the male child. So if you then rear up, so when you have perpetrators today, they were reared yesterday. And the ones that will be perpetrators tomorrow are being reared today.
Wow.
So we have to look at that family unit. That's the beginning, where you then have a sense of entitlement that everybody should be at my beck and call. I should have my way all the time. And where that doesn't happen, I can take action. That's one. The second reason is if you grow up in a home where you witness violence from the father to the mother or to anyone who, opposes them as the means of resolving conflict, you grow up accepting that as the norm. So all of these are things you witness in the home. You then look at the culture and the society where you live, and there's a lot of stigma and shame associated more with females who are unmarried or females who are divorced. They are seen as sort of failures because they say you are not able to keep your family. But there is no such equivalence according to the male who is divorced or who is unmarried. And so rather you have appeals, try and get married now, what is the problem? But for a female, it will be assumed that, oh, she doesn't have good character, she doesn't have integrity, that's why no man has married her till date. So these are subtle things that perpetuate it. So we also have, even our religious clergy also have a role to play, because when you have violence in a relationship or in a marriage, you tend to hear, be patient, pray more, it will work out, and all of that, until unfortunately fatal consequences occur. And the last one is this. We, in our society, I'm a psychiatrist, and we have mental health professionals, we have psychologists, we have psychiatrists who can intervene, because some people have personality flaws. They are not necessarily bad people, but they have poor anger management.
We'll come to those character flaws, because those ones are also quite critical.
Yeah, so when people don't understand that there can be interventions, it also leads to the occurrence of this.
My colleague was asking the other time about, the different names that you give to these abuses. Then there is spousal abuse, intimate partner abuse, intimate partner violence. I didn't even know such names occurred. That such names existed for this kind of thing. It's bad. It's as simple as that. What's your take on all of these? This whole conversation, as Madam said earlier, started again because of a recent occurrence that we all know, the death of a famous gospel musician. So, in all of these, what have we missed as a society?
Advocates have been talking about this for a long time, but it didn't make a lot of sense. A lot of people didn't give a lot of attention to it because of the way we have been socialized. Now, like Mrs. Atinuke said, we used to hide this kind of violence because of the shame and the stigma that is attached. And from the religious point of view, you're also told to pray, you're also told to fast. You're not supposed to paint a bad picture about your family. You're supposed to project that beautiful image. No woman wants to come out to say, my husband is beating me. No man wants to be known as a wife beater. So we hide all of this. We pretend and we think that it doesn't matter. We have kept all of these for a very long time. You hear stories of men saying, my mother was being beaten, but my mother stayed. And a lot of these women give excuses and they say they're staying because of the children. Now, they don't know the colossal damage they're doing to the children. For every time you stay in an abusive situation and the children keep seeing this form of abuse, the children, they are growing up and they are making decisions of them, and decisions based on what they are seeing. We've seen people ladies who have grown up to say, I would never tolerate any rubbish from any man. I grew up, my mom was not financially empowered, and the number one thing on my mind was I was going to be financially empowered, and I was never going to be a housewife, because my mother was a housewife all through her life. And when my dad passed on, they had to distribute all the children among family members. So I grew up knowing that I would never be a housewife to any man. So we have a lot of people like that who are in the same situations, who have grown up seeing their parents, their mothers especially, being beaten, and the mothers stay because of them, and they're bottling up all of this. Now, these are childhood traumas that they need to heal from. Most of the time, when the men see that their mothers are being beaten, their mothers take it. They've grown up to know that, okay, this is a norm. A woman is supposed to take abuse. So they begin to beat their partners, you know. Some of them, the ladies begin to verbally abuse the partner, and the man begin to physically beat the partner. Now, if you are from a very religious background, you don't want anybody to know. Even if you mention it, you're going to be told you need to fast. Because one of the reasons that is being given is that God hates divorce. So that statement has done a lot of damage. And
I'm sorry, madam. You're going to continue, because I have another question. God hates divorce, but he doesn't hate the divorcee.
No, he doesn't hate the divorcee.
That point ought to also be communicated. But in terms of the manifestation of this spousal abuse, in what ways does it manifest? Well, the doctor has talked about physically beating a spouse, verbally abusing a spouse, emotionally abusing a spouse, and I think he also talked about sexually abusing. In what ways do these things manifest, in the homes that makes these people? Okay, maybe let me ask it differently. I'm actually interested in the sexual violence part, because I've heard people say that until they feel pain in that department, they don't enjoy it. And so where do we draw the line between sexual violence and that sexual orientation?
That's a conditioning. They have been conditioned that way. If a girl is used to the fact that without pain she doesn't enjoy sex, it's a conditioning from when she started having sex. And most of the time, it's because of what they see. It's because of what they have gone through. Like, I know people who, if they are not beaten, they don't enjoy sex. And when I had a one-on-one with them, it was because of the way they grew up. They saw their mother being beaten. I was telling you something as we were coming. Yeah. Yes. Someone is being beaten, and the husband forcefully has sex with her. And she's being told, if you don't give him willingly, he would take it by force anyway, after beating you. And the truth is, our children are seeing most of these things. And their minds are being conditioned that this is the norm. But it is not the norm, which is one of the advocacy we're doing now, to say it is not the norm. Violence is not accepted in any form, be it sexual, be it verbal. There's also financial abuse.
I wonder why the doctor didn't mention that financial part.
There are several types of abuses that, sometimes just falls within the crack. I mean, the physical one, it's easy to see. The bruises, the black eye, and all of that. For me, one of the most critical forms of abuse, and again, women facing it the most. A research in 2018 says that 1 in 4 Nigerian women, 1 in 4 Nigerian women actually go through one form of abuse or the other. So he was talking about the UK data. It's just so we see how close the figures are, and the fact that during the COVID, it was even tagged as an endemic. It's that bad, the shadow pandemic. Emotional trauma that comes from all of these things has a way of perpetuating the gender-based violence that we see. You know, you mentioned something when you started to speak about the different words that are used and how those words are used interchangeably. Within the domestic sphere, we have issues of incest, for instance. And how do people deal with incest? Not just when this Osinachi case came up, there was also something about a child there was incest in the family, and you know, people were advising the mother, don't talk about it, don't go out there, don't embarrass the girl, don't disgrace your husband. There's another issue of the stepfather that had raped a daughter, and people are like, your husband has begged you, take your daughter out of the house before she becomes second madam, fight for your marriage, you know. And it's our condition, and socialization is very strong. The way we are cultured, the way we have been wired to think through things, you know. And I believe that at this point in time is the time when we need to rethink. Rethink. Yeah.
It is that rethinking that I think brought us to this topic that we're talking about today. But you haven't talked about that financial abuse.
Okay, so the financial
I'm very interested
abuse,
in that.
yes, you need to be. So in terms of financial abuse, then for some people, you say, oh, my wife can't work. Okay, fine, for whatever reason.
Provide for her.
Provide for her. It's always about control, the power over.
Absolutely.
Always about control, the power over. In actual fact, abuse itself is about the power over. No man is going to, will you fight the bus conductor on the streets when he annoys you? You will caution yourself because you're not sure if he's going to batter you. But when it comes to this person, because you know. So when a woman has no finances of hers and she has to come and plead and beg for everything, of course she can't do anything.
But it's the same thing
Not
with the man.
even with her children.
There are those who are watching us now, and they're definitely going to come for us. And they're going to say, look, there are situations, you know, doctor, you may have heard that as well, situations where it is the woman that is working, the man is not, is the house husband, they call it now?
Yeah.
I heard that before, you know, so it's both ways, right?
So like doctor said earlier, the
ratio,
rate,
yes,
the ratio
is
not there.
Yes.
And then again, we need to try and put things in proper perspectives. When I train and I'm talking to people, I say when you talk about a man that does not have resources, which is where you have most of the verbal abuse actually. When it's like you didn't drop money, let's put this thing in perspective. So there's the issue of the man that is irresponsible, that squanders all the money, that is a drunk, that spends all the money outside there. There's that one. There's the issue of someone that is hardworking, he's not a lazy person. There's this unfortunate occurrence for a season and there are no resources. Again, our socialization. That socialization that keeps saying that a man must provide everything. You hear people say, no, I cannot drop one kobo. My husband has to provide all. You see men getting angry and fighting over, my wife is the one that has the money now. And so I can, no, God forbid, I can't ask her for money. I would rather suffer. I would rather work. Because we've been socialized to believe that he should be able to provide everything. Absolutely fine. But when you don't have, is not enough reason for you to be emotionally battered and all of that.
It is because the man has not suffered enough. Dr. Abdul-Malik, let me ask you this. And sometimes these things are about the personality. You wanted to talk about some character flaws the other time. I don't know, maybe there are other descriptions, but I have heard stories of a group of people called narcissists who have a specialty in frustrating, sucking the juice out of the life of their partners or anyone that is around them. How prevalent is that in this case that we're talking about?
Right, it's actually very prevalent, and I'm glad you mentioned this because the personality also comes into play, and Ms. Odukoya also mentioned that there is some sort of power play. For some individuals, it's about the trail and the power. You know what they say, that power intoxicates, and then absolute power intoxicates. So wherever, whether male or female, if you have more power, there is the tendency for that power to get to your head and for you to become an oppressor, in quote. And Personality also comes into play here, because personality is your default disposition to behaving and to treating people. So those who are narcissists, they have an overinflated sense of self. They believe they are superior and better than everybody, and the world exists to serve them.
Even though they are very poor.
It doesn't matter whether they are poor. They believe that all of you do not know their true value. That's why you have not given them the wealth that is deserving to them. You know, so even if they are students, they do an exam, they score 20, other students scored 80, they say that examiner doesn't know anything, he doesn't appreciate my genius. So it's all about the mindset. So when you then have that kind of mindset in a relationship or in a marriage, it's a recipe for problems. There is going to be abuse. But it's not black or white. If they are fortunate and they marry someone with an opposite personality trait that we call dependent personality, who is ready to be the floor mat and do everything to worship the floor, then it will be perfect bliss. But where you
partnership made in heaven.
Made in heaven, both parties will be satisfied. But where you don't have that kind of matching personality, then there will be conflicts. And when there is conflict, he will want to then exert his dominion. And then you then have abuse, physical and all sorts, financial. And some of these individuals go to very, strategic extent to manipulate, to deceive, to achieve their end objectives. But even in this instance, if they have insight, if they are aware, some people grow up and then they begin to get feedback that you behave this way and it's unacceptable, and they may then say, how can I get better? Because I don't want us to go away, those watching and listening, go away with the impression of, oh, okay, if I have narcissistic trait, that's the way I am and that's it. That's not so. There is room for psychological intervention. You can learn to trim the edges, modify your behavior, and improve.
That is, if they come out to you.
Yes.
Because most of the time, those who do these things, they gaslight
They're not even aware.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and if they acknowledge,
Absolutely.
not necessarily not being aware, but if they acknowledge the fact that they are. Again, what happens here in our climb is that we've been, particularly men, have been socialized to be supermen. And they don't believe that there's anything wrong with them. So when someone is saying you need to see a psychotherapist, a psychologist, to name whatever.
Do you mean I'm mad?
No, but in this climb as well, that is
Absolutely.
not acceptable. Because that means we're in.
Do you mean
Exactly.
I'm mad?
The way
Do you
people
mean I don't know
also
what I'm
see
doing?
mental health.
Seeing a therapist in our climb is not like over there, where seeing a therapist is,
And
chats
then
for
because
every
our
day.
society has made a lot of women believe that you should be that floor mat, the doormat.
Yes,
and
yes.
you should be docile, and you should not speak out, and you
accept.
should just accept he's
Yeah.
your husband.
Yeah.
If he's done something wrong, okay, beg him. You people, you've begged, and then
He
you
has
would
done
go.
wrong, but you
see,
beg.
and then women have learned over the years to take on the shame of their husbands. So someone, and I'll give an example of someone that is married to a drunk, for instance. He's drinking. He's sleeping around in the gutters. Madam, you are not a drunkard. You don't drink. You're not on the streets. Why are you the one that is ashamed? And those are part of the things that we've taken on as women in this part of the world. And so he comes in, he beats you blue-black. You're screaming. The neighbors have heard that you're screaming, so they know. In their minds, they've started again. But you still have that need to paint a picture of a perfect
Everything's
home.
okay.
Everything is fine. But you're dealing with a narcissist. And sometimes people don't even know. Sometimes people don't have that internal strength to even fight stuff. One of the things that I would like people to know is that setting boundaries sometimes helps. Because once you play the doormat, and for most of the time, we're all human, you get tired. You get worn out. And so one day you will kick back.
Yeah.
And then when you kick back, even to the entire world, it looks like, oh, what's wrong with her? Suddenly she has a bit of money now and she's growing wings. But that's not it. And if you've done it for so long, you then tend to want to hide in your space. And you don't want people to know.
Okay.
Now, Doctor, before we go to the support for those who have suffered abuse, quickly, let me take you on regarding something that she said earlier about the boy child who witnesses his father abusing his mother, and he grows into an abuser himself. But we have heard of cases of boy children who stand up to their fathers.
Right.
The day you touch my mother again, I'm going to kill you. So those kinds, what kind of adults do they grow up to be?
Oh, thank you. Now, it's important to know that as human beings, we are neither white or black. We have different personalities, and if you expose 10 people to the same scenario, you cannot absolutely predict how the 10 will react. So we have those who will say, oh, okay, Eureka, so that's a way of solving problems. Beat the person into submission and you have your way. Some people will come to that conclusion. Some other children will say, my mom is a good woman. She takes good care of me. She doesn't deserve this, and daddy is being unfair. This is not right. And will then either, step up to the father or grow up with the mindset that I must never repeat the mistakes that my dad did. And I'll also talk to my friends and ensure that in my circle, this doesn't happen. I don't want any other woman to suffer the way my mother suffered. So the different ways it pans out depends partly on the nature of the child and their interpretation and the conclusions they arrive at.
Okay. Now, Antonia, let's go to the support part now. You are a survivor. What kind of support did you get or was available to you at the time that you suffered abuse?
Okay, I need to make a correction. It wasn't domestic abuse.
Okay.
It wasn't domestic abuse. It was incest from my uncle.
Okay.
Okay, so
But it happened domestically, just say.
Yes, it did.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yes, it did. The first time I spoke out, I didn't speak for a long time because of the shame and the stigma that is attached to incest and rape in this part of the country. In this part of the world, I beg your pardon. A girl is stigmatized for saying she was raped, and you're going to hear stuff like, nobody is going to marry you. Nobody wants to marry a girl that has been raped. And nobody talks about the man who rapes the girl. So I didn't speak up for a long time. But the first person I spoke to after I spoke up, she just listened to me and she gave me her shoulders to cry on, and I really cried that day. Now, in 2015, I had a mental health breakdown. I was admitted in a mental health hospital. It was when I came back from there, after all the therapy and counseling I went through, it then occurred to me that, oh, you have a lot of adults like me who have gone through childhood traumas, who haven't healed, and we're suffering from the psychological effect, and it's affecting our lives as adults. So for instance, you see a 40-year-old lady, and when she's asked about her childhood trauma, she breaks down and she begins to cry. It's not the 40-year-old who is crying. It's that 12-year-old child inside of her that was abused. It's that inner child that is crying for help. So I just realized that, with therapy and with counseling, you can live a normal life again. For a very religious person, I come from a very religious background, I thought that once you pray and you read your Bible, you're fine. So I never knew that going for therapy wasn't a sin as it was meant to be. And in 2015, when I spoke about my mental health issues, the stigmatization was very real. I was bullied and told to shut up. You don't come out to say you have mental health issues, which is one of the reasons a lot of people will not even want to go seek a therapist. Because once you say, I want to go and see a therapist, it's like you're mad, But for people like us now, we've decided to be shameless, to say there's nothing shameful about you going to see a therapy. You would live a normal life again. Yes, you might not be able to heal totally and perfectly, but you will be able to live normally again, move on with your life and all of that. So that is one of the reasons why we started the support group, to give counseling, to give help to people who don't want to speak out. So it's a safe space. No videos, no recordings are done.
Okay.
How do you get them to speak out?
Okay, so I speak out on social media. So people reach out.
Okay.
So, for instance, now with the case of Osinachi now, a lot of people have been reaching out. So like in Lagos State, we have what is called the mandated reporter. So you can report on behalf of the person who is being abused. and the Lagos State has a toll-free number that you can call. So for instance, I put a post on something like that on my page, and I begin to get people come inbox, people are sending pictures of their faces, people are sending numbers, sending the addresses.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Antonia.
It's fine.
What's that number?
Okay, 080.
Okay. Go on, she'll catch
08,000.
08,000.
8,000.
Yes. 333. 333.
Okay. That's the Lagos State number for
Yes.
reporting
Any form of gender-based violence.
Okay.
Yes, that's the number for Lagos State
DSV.
Domestic and Sexual Offences Response Agency.
Okay.
DSV.
The number again is 08,000
Yes.
333333.
Yes, that's the number.
Right.
That's the number. Yes.
Good.
So you can call that number now.
You can call the number now. Somebody would respond to you. If there's a case of violence, the person will get help. The person can be picked up. You don't have to drop your name or
So
anything.
what's the name of that agency again? Lagos State?
Lagos State Domestic and Sexual Offences Response Agency.
Okay. Now,
Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. We're still talking about this support.
yes.
What role does society have? The immediate environment. What role do they have to play in this kind of situation? I mean, just as Madam said, they have started again. And that is, in fact, some will just bring video out and be their phones out and be recording, and that is it, and post it on social media just for fun. And that is it. In recent time, I've seen videos of men that using what we used to call layad.
Yes.
To beat their spouses. I saw only one video of a woman beating the man back
I saw it
in
yesterday.
public. So what role does society have to play in this, stopping that man in his tracks?
I think the first thing we need to realize now is that we have a problem in our hand. Okay. I want to use this synergy. I'm sorry. She passed. We're very sorry about that. I want to use her as an example. She's like the epitome of a good wife material. She looks like if you see her picture, you see this is a very conservative girl, a good girl who is married, and she has listened to everything that she's been taught in church, how to keep your home and all of that. Now, what do we need to do as a society? We need to stop shaming people who are bold enough to say, I'm going through this. We need to stop stigmatizing women who are divorced or who are separated. If that girl had spoken up, I'm very sure a lot of churches would never have invited her again to minister in their church, because they would label her a divorcee or a separated woman. They would not allow her handle the mic to lead praise and worship. I can tell you that free of charge. One of the reasons why I'm sure she never said that. So we need to demystify all of this. If a woman comes out to say, okay, I'm going through domestic abuse, it doesn't make her less of a woman.
Okay. Madam, to you now. So that's one way. Do you think it's a good idea for members of the immediate community who notice such thing happening to go into that home and say, Mr. Man, stop it?
I actually think so. And I think that at this point, practically every Nigerian should be a psychosocial first aider, a psychological first aider. We've been doing that, training community members, people that are respected within this communities, irrespective of your field, in how to be a psychosocial or a psychological first aider. 3 things: look, listen, and link. Well,
But
talking,
you know that if you go to the neighbor's house, they're going to throw you out, don't you?
No, so
that is not your business.
Absolutely. But now the training is on how to approach. You're not there to tell them what they're doing is right or wrong, advice and all of that. One is we're letting people know, what does the law say? Lagos State has a mandatory reporting. People don't know. You can report on behalf of someone now, you know. So in terms of looking, you see what's happening. Usually you can only hide these things for so long. People will know. Somebody will talk. And you don't need to delve into their affairs you can report it anonymously. That's one. The second one is that a lot of people do have that around the area approach. Religious leader, mommy in church, you know, all the mommies, all the daddies. And what we're trying to do is to help people to understand, like she said, demystify it. Let's take the shame shroud out of it. And you're not a professional. All you need to do is link. One of the things we're seeing is that people then shy away from when you want to connect them to an institution. All right? So for me, it's not about always saying, leave this space. Some people need to leave like yesterday before they die in it. Some people, if you're married to a narcissist that will not go through therapy, that there's nothing you can do. Gaslighting and all, you probably would decide to be the doormat and just leave, or you want to have an exit plan. That's another category. But like Dr. Abdul Malik said, that some people actually can go through therapy, anger management classes, and all of that. And so we are promoting that and talking about the look, listen, and link.
Okay.
In listening also, we have a way of, we know what before you've said it. Or you're talking and I know, your husband, I said, no, that youth pastor, no, he can't be your husband. I mean, and then the people can't talk. So we're saying don't judge anyone, all right? Believe her story first. Believe his story first. If you can't do anything about it, connect to the right place.
Okay.
So
one other community that these things usually play out and people don't know is the workplace.
Oh, yeah.
A hitherto ebullient person begins to be quieter by the day at the workplace. And she won't talk. He won't talk. But the people in the environment can see that their productivity level is dropping. What does that person do, Dr. Malik? What does the organization do?
Right. Now, you've just opened another can of worms that exists in our society, which is that we do not have work-related mental health support. WHO defines health as a state of physical, mental, and social well-being. Three components. So health sits on three legs: physical, mental, and social well-being. Most workplaces have health insurance that caters to physical health. They want to employ you, they ask you to do an X-ray, blood test, and so on, physical test. But there is no support for mental health or social health in the workplace. And that's...
We're not sure whether or not we are recruiting patients.
So that's even at the level of recruitment. But even when you then have staff, right? For instance, imagine in a workplace, these are things that happen routinely. A member of staff is bereaved. The son or daughter dies suddenly. The spouse dies suddenly. What is the policy of providing support? Most workplaces, I will tell you for free, have no such policy, nothing. Everybody just wings it. Oh, we'll go and visit the person. We'll go and say sorry. And all of that. There is what is called Employee Assistance Program, which provides psychological, emotional, social support for staff. And that is routine globally, but in Nigeria it's still very rudimentary, right? Because we do not appreciate these things. We only pay attention to physical health. So workplace, we need to train HR. Most organizations, once you hear HR, your heart will start racing. What did I do wrong?
It's natural.
But HR,
everywhere.
HR, yes, but you see increasingly, HR is supposed to provide support, help staff be more productive,
but you know,
identify
the staff,
challenges.
The HR has to know before they can offer that kind of support.
Exactly.
Now, HR may not know because HR is not the one working directly with the staff who needs this support.
Yes, I'm saying that HR, part of the responsibilities of HR is to ensure that staff have access to this kind of support. Not wait until problems occur.
But don't forget that many of these people will not report it. That's my point.
Also because HR, I'm sorry to butt in, because HR in this part is seen as rubber stamp. And so many people don't see it.
when you make mistakes.
Yes, and they don't see it as I can go in there. How many HRs, even when you have a whistleblowing policy and you're being sexually harassed in the office and you go to the HR, once the person that is sexually harassing you is the boss, then what?
You don't blow the whistle.
So those things are there and those things are real.
Is that the reason that people who are victims of spousal abuse or domestic violence will not get support from the office?
They're not. How do I go to my office to say I'm being beaten up?
No, you won't beat. You won't be the one to say it, but your staff, your co-staff will know that.
Yeah, if someone knows, with the exception of if that organization or institution has a policy and then they are actually implementing the policy, because those are two things.
Okay.
But Mr. Duhoya, you go and blow the whistle on somebody who's being abused.
Yeah.
And then something happens, she's called out or something, and she was advised to go look for care. And then she's mad at you, her husband is mad at you because she hasn't even, she's in denial. She won't accept, that what is happening at home is wrong. And she knows that if her husband gets to know that anybody else knows, she's going to get a worse beating when she gets back home.
So that's a tough situation for people as adults, actually. And that's part of why a lot of women, nobody does nobody can do anything because if I don't give you permission to wade into my situation, I don't see how you're going to come in there to come and wade. Exactly. My understanding of what he's saying, and I'm taking it from that angle, I'm looking at issues of maybe like sexual harassment within the workplace. I'm looking I'm looking at
someone who is
abused at home.
Abused at home.
Okay, and then
productivity is low, dropping because of that, Doctor.
Yes, I think the solution to that is psychological first aid. It's a simple training. We all know we have first aid boxes in our home, in primary school and so on, but that's for cuts and bruises. There is something also developed by the WHO called psychological first aid. It is something that everybody should be able to do. You don't have to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And it's very easy to train. It's part of what we do. We do trainings on it as part of the activities of our organizations. Every workplace, including HR, should try and train staff on psychological first aid. We should train staff on life support. If somebody slumps, how do you do first aid, revival, resuscitation? If you notice a member of staff that is having problems, how do you approach them? How do you talk to them?
That is psychological first aid. Out of time, but I need to take each person's last word on this in one sentence only. Doctor.
Spousal abuse, violence causes a lot of emotional harm and damage. It includes blaming self, depression, anxiety, and so on. They need professional help, and I'm very glad that you are very open about your experience and that you healed, but every other person out there needs that intervention.
Mrs. Odukoya.
All right, I would say that everyone needs to begin to look out for issues of violence, gender-based violence, including domestic violence, and that psychosocial or psychological first aid is a key. It's a major way of being able to reach people generally. And so I think that people should try and embrace that, and our religious bodies need to be a part of that. And the
organization is there to give support should anybody require
of that. Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am. Your closing statement.
Okay. My closing statement will be that, like I said before, we should try and demystify the way we treat people who have gone through any form of violence, especially domestic violence right now. We should stop shaming women who have left their homes because of domestic violence. We should stop blaming them. Then the church should also stop telling women to pray and fast for a man who is always beating them. The men need to get help. We have classes like anger management classes, self-discovery classes for those men. And I also want to let the women know that you are not a shame, you are not a disgrace for living an abusive home. I want you to know that you are valuable and you are loved. Thank you.
Thank you. Antonia Ojenamo, Sexual and Gender-Based Violence, SGBV advocate. We also had Dr. Jibril Abdul Malik, consultant psychiatrist and founder and CEO, Asido Foundation, as well as Atinuke Odukoya. Director, Center for Women's Health and Information. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for coming to throw
us.
more light on this, and I'm sure that we have taken away a lot from this discussion this morning.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sunrise will return in a moment. Make sure you stay with us for the Easter story.